Well, welcome everyone. We will start the meeting of the February 24th, 2022 Fire and Commission meeting today at 4:03 p.m. Carol, would you mind conducting roll call?
No problem. Chair Rodriguez.
Here.
Vice Chair Allman.
Here.
Commissioner Travis Teague. We know she's absent at the moment. Commissioner Anderson.
Here, good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon. And Commissioner Wood.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Are there any changes to the agenda that anyone would like to request? Okay. And Carol, do we have any public comment from the public that would like to make comments on items not on the agenda?
No, I don't see anyone listed. Thank you.
Then we will move to item number 4, approval of the minutes. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, John moves. John moves. Louisa, Commissioner Wood seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, so minutes are approved. And then we will move to old business. Would anyone like to make a comment or raise conversation about old business?
That wasn't where I'm supposed to come in on that other thing, is it?
Yes.
I forgot. Oh, it
Yeah.
is. Okay. I'll go ahead. In our rules and regs with the Fire and Police Commission, there's a paragraph about ID cards that we have not been issued, and I don't know that they've ever been issued, but it's my opinion and I do occasionally show up at a fire or something like that just to visit and see what's going on, but hardly anybody knows me anymore. And that's not the big part. It's just that I think there should be some sort of an ID card for each one of us in case the question comes up, who are you? And I don't know if John is he on? Is he on right now?
I am, Commissioner, yes.
What are your thoughts? I mean, I read this a couple of years ago and we just haven't chased it down, but seems appropriate.
Thoughts on what? I'm sorry, the thoughts on?
On the ID card for commissioners or any of the commissioners around the city.
You know, that's more of a policy decision, you know, from if the department wants to issue it. So it's really out of my, not to pass the buck, but it's really out of my lane. Perhaps it's something that you can bring up since you're liaison with the fire department or police department. But generally, we don't have any. No commissioners have like a ID card, you know, in terms of, at least I don't know of any that has that. So that's just the history. I maybe years ago they did, but currently they do not.
That just raises the question, we need to review the document. There's a few other things that need to be done on that, but if that's the case, if there aren't any available, then it's a moot issue. But I mean, I can probably get one through the fire department if I really wanted to, but if they would allow it. But I don't know, it just seems appropriate, but if that's the case, why we can let it go. I don't know.
So Attorney Doimus, on page 8 of the advisory group guidelines, at the top, the oath of office identification cards, there's two lines that say appointees are provided with identification cards identifying them as members of the board, commission, or committees to which they have been appointed. So it's in the it's in the guidelines, and I think that's why Vice Chair Almond brought it up, because it is in there, but it's not being practiced.
Correct. Well, I don't want to have a full discussion because of the Brown Act, because it hasn't been agendized. Perhaps we can agendize that at a future meeting, because I just don't want to go into a full discussion on that right now at this time. But I can look into it with the police and fire, and we can present something. We can place on the next agenda,
Okay.
Good.
or we can treat it as an administrative item too, where it's not, because their ID cards are not really a issue on public business. So I'll see. I'll talk to both departments on that.
Okay, and I don't
Thank
know
you.
if this needs to go into new business section, but I'm wondering if we could reschedule that formal presentation, similar to what you offered the Community Formation Commission with the PowerPoint on the charter of what the Fire and Police Commission is, the roles and authority.
Absolutely, I can do that next meeting. We'll schedule that.
Okay, because I know that the CFC is keeping you really busy, so
fine.
if next
fine.
month isn't gonna work,
No, it'll work. I can do it. I've had something prepared before, so I'll just dust it off and update it. So no problem.
okay. Are there any other items of old business that the commissioners would like to bring up? Do we need to open public comment on that because we had discussion?
We open public comment just for the item in general. That's it.
Okay. Any do we have public comment on old business or related to this item agenda? Carol, are there any hands raised?
No, there are not.
Okay, so then we will move to item number 7, new business. And I think we covered that with agendizing the formal presentation on charter and authorities of the Fire and Police Commission. Any other new business? Not yet. Oh, yeah, not into the liaison meetings. Any public comments? Any hands raised for public comment on new business items?
No, Chair Rodriguez.
Okay, great. Now we're going to move to the bulk of this meeting. We're moving to item number 8, police and fire liaison reports. Vice Chair Almond, would you mind presenting first?
Sure. Had a conversation with Chief Males on Tuesday, which we usually do a couple of days before the meeting, just to check the temperature on the department, see how everybody's doing. I know both fire and police are really busy right now with all sorts of issues, but his report to me was favorable as far as folks working and the workload and how they're getting along, which is one of my primary thoughts when I talk to him, among other things. But that's basically what we talked to. But he'll be filling us in more on activities and things coming up when he speaks. That's all I have.
Thank you, Vice Chair Almond. Commissioner Wood, would you mind presenting on your police liaison report? And I believe you'll be including updates on the Community Formation Commission.
That is correct. Carol, if I might be able to share the screen, I have a presentation. Thank you.
There you go, you got it.
Always got to make sure you choose the right thing. There we go. Hello, good afternoon, all. I'm Louisa Wood, and Chief Malakian and I got the chance to meet delightfully yesterday. We will be meeting every month. Today I'm going to be focusing on, for the presentation today, I'm going to be focusing on the Community Formation Commission because there is a lot going on right now with that commission. Chief will be providing an update as well after I'm done with this presentation. But part of what I would like to do is talk about and remind. I know Barbara is new to the commission, so kind of talk about where we are, what the model is, what the recommendations are at this point, where we are in the process, and where we're going to go moving forward. So. So to review the model, the Community Formation Commission, they have drafted recommendations in a hybrid model. And I'll talk about what that means, but that incorporates aspects of a review-focused and an auditor-monitor-focused models of civilian oversight. Again, I'll talk about more about that, what that might look like for us. It also includes drafted recommendations for this agency to have ability to conduct independent investigations when necessary. So at this point, they're just drafted recommendations. The CFC may recommend to the City Council the development of a civilian oversight. So that's that review-focused piece. That includes the COB may be made up of 11 people, and it may provide opportunities to review and recommend changes to police department policies, procedures, and training. It might provide opportunities for community input and education in policing practices in Santa Barbara. It may also provide a mechanism for the impartial and fair review of investigations completed by the Santa Barbara Police Department regarding allegations of police misconduct. So that's that one side. And then the other side is this auditor monitor focus. And that, so the CFC may recommend to the City Council the development of an Office of Police Oversight that could accept complaints of alleged misconduct from the public, could provide staffing to the Community Oversight Board and organize necessary training. It could analyze policing patterns and trends. It may recommend changes in policies and procedures. It might promote a police department that is responsive to community needs through community engagement strategies, and it could identify opportunities for systemic change within the Santa Barbara Police Department. So that's that model, that hybrid model of having both, let me go back up, having both the review focus and an auditor monitor focus. Just a reminder, these are just drafted recommendations at this point. So this week, there is a lot going on. So here is a timeline of the process starting from November to January, which that commission was discussing and making decisions on specific civilian oversight recommendations. They were finalizing draft recommendations, and they were getting ready. They were developing a survey to distribute in February. So that's January. Also in January, there were a bunch of introduction presentations that were completed by the commissioners, and there were about 19 introductory presentations, including 8 presentations to law enforcement, 11 presentations with community organizations. This week, just today, yesterday, today, tomorrow, there are focus groups that are going on. That includes 9 focus groups that incorporated professional facilitators from NACOL, which is the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, note takers from UCSB, a facilitator guide developed with NACOL, with commissioners and individuals from NACOL and the Center for Court Innovations. And we have they have about around 70 people registered for those focus groups. So that's happening right now. Next week, there should be the distribution of the survey to the Santa Barbara City, that's the HOPE, which is also developed in conjunction with NACOL and CCI. So the survey is going out, and they're going to be collecting data on the drafted recommendations. And then the next steps after that, so this is in March, the data will be coming back. It will be presented to the commission. And that is the time when those drafted recommendations could be changed to something different. And then, so the entire month of March and into April, the commission will be changing those recommendations based on community feedback and other types of collaborations across the city. And In April, the commission will then present the final recommendations to the city council. And then the city council will then take those recommendations and move forward. So that is currently where we are with the Community Formation Commission, where they are with the Community Formation Commission, excuse me. And then next month, I will be presenting more updates on the CFC, and also the new Santa Barbara Police Chief selection process will start. And I will be giving updates on that, what that will look like, and any other business that the chief and I will be discussing. So that is my presentation.
This question on the survey
Yes,
to the city of Santa Barbara, is that to all the citizenry?
it's all the citizens of Santa Barbara.
And how does that go out? A mailer or?
Well, there will be multiple ways that it goes out. I know that we'll be working to get it out through the community, through the Santa Barbara Police Department, through organizations, through Santa Barbara City College. I know that the media will be involved in that to get that it's going to be a link. So that we are hoping to get as many people to complete that survey as possible. And when that link goes out, that will be shared in many ways.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Wood, in that vein, I just had a couple of questions in terms of the target population of the focus groups. I see that you have 70 individuals that have accepted that invitation, but what were the specific populations or community leaders that you engaged or invited to participate in that process?
So the commission had a long discussion of community organizations. I don't have it in front of me, but we went across the city and the commission provided input as to communities, including the law enforcement, including the business sector. Oh gosh, I wish I had the list in front of me. I'm sorry, nonprofit organizations, the clergy. I believe we reach out to the community, local communities that individuals that represent and organizations that represent communities across the city. We tried to make it as extensive. Santa Barbara Community College, UCSB, Santa Barbara Unified. We reached out to organizations that work with people with individuals with disabilities, mental health disorders, people experiencing organizations who provide support for individuals experiencing homelessness, organizations that provide support to, what else was I gonna say? I had lost it. I'm sorry, I can't remember what I was about to say, but we tried to be as extensive as possible.
Are any of the focus groups going to be facilitated in multiple languages?
So we provided the opportunity for that when we sent out the link. It was both in English and in Spanish, and anyone who filled it out, if they asked for interpretation or access to, if they needed any sort of accessibility due to disability, we provided those opportunities.
Great, and the survey is the same, multiple languages there as well?
Yes, mm-hmm. Correct.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions?
I see that Chair Escobedo is in attendance, and I, if he wanted to use this time to add or answer questions, I'd like to invite that. So if you'd like to add anything, Chair Escobedo, please feel free to raise your hand. Okay, so as a reminder, Commissioner Wood and I are both serving on that commission as general commissioners. And I have to say, particularly this week, I know that Commissioner Wood and the chair of the CFC have worked very hard and put in many hours getting the focus group organized. So I just want to just acknowledge that and thank Commissioner Wood and everybody who's on the CFC for all their hard work to get these recommendations out to community so that we can get their feedback, because that's going to be huge.
And thank you very much. And I would just like to say, as part of that commission, I would like to say to the community, all of the community, we need your input. The survey is coming out, and your voice and your thoughts are valuable. So please take the opportunity when you have it and share it with everyone in the community that you know of, to get this word out so that we can get this information back and get these draft recommendations to the appropriate place. Thank you.
I'll send that draft, the set of recommendations that have been sent to community. I'll send that to Carol. And if Carol, if you can share that with this commission, because I think it's really, really important that the Fire and Police Commission read through those recommendations. And this would be a great place to ask questions or get clarifications, in addition to completing the survey and encouraging your network to complete the survey.
Sure, Chair Rodriguez, no problem.
Chairman Rodriguez, I believe you mentioned this at a meeting, I believe maybe December, of the Fire and Police Commission, about the linkages between the Fire and Police Commission, the Community Formation Commission, and then eventually what would be the Civilian Oversight Board. Have you been able to kind of thoughtfully engage in conversation about what those linkages could be at this time, or is that going to be at a future date?
Well, I'd like to invite Attorney Doimus to chime in should I speak incorrectly, but at this point right now, because the Community Formation Commission is a limited time, it's an ad hoc commission that was tasked specifically to do research and create recommendations. There is no relationship other than the fact that Commissioner Wood and I sit on both commissions. Other than that, there's no formal relationship. And I think that once the charter is, or the ordinance is created, that's when we will know what the relationship is. Attorney Doimus, could you speak more about that? Attorney Doimus, would you mind sharing more information about the relationship between the potential oversight body and the Fire and Police Commission?
And maybe Commissioner Rodriguez, I can clarify the question too, is if there's been any recommendations that would suggest that there be linkages between the Civilian Oversight Board and the Fire and Police Commission, even that one of the 11 representatives on the Civilian Oversight Board would be a representative from the commission. And just discussion wise, not that it's landed or is a current recommendation, but discussion among the Community Formation Commission about that.
I want to give this to Commissioner Wood because this is part of her reporting. So I just like to bring that back to her.
So there have been discussions about the potential overlaps or the linkages between the two commissions. There has, again, John Doimus, it would be nice if you could chime in too, but we haven't the commission hasn't officially figured out or decided how they will work together. And I believe that Chair Rodriguez is correct in that once it moves forward through the city council, that will become more clear. But there has been discussions of how those overlap and how recommendations from the Community Formation Commission, or excuse me, the future commission that's being developed by the community, the Oversight Board, may interact with the Police and Fire Commission.
And I just had, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add, since I was asked by Commissioner Wood too, I did a conflict look, did a presentation a couple weeks ago in terms of, is there anything that conflicts with our city charter, our code in terms of the draft recommendations? And since the Fire and Police Commission can make recommendations and it says it's permissive language, then there's nothing stopping a new commission doing the same, right, for making recommendations and all that. So it's at least allowed. How that would work, either two sets of recommendations. I don't know how that will. I guess we haven't gone that far, but at least there's no conflict on that issue.
Thank you for
And
the
Commissioner-
clarification. All right, go ahead.
Commissioner Anderson, that is a really good question. And that's one of the reasons why I am hoping that our current Fire and Police Commission can be more clear about our roles and what our authority and duties are. And I think once we do that step, which sounds like it will occur next month, we'll be able to more, I guess, clearly understand what that relationship may be or what conflict may occur. But I that is a really good question. So.
Well, and Commissioner Rodriguez and Commissioner Wood, I just appreciate the clarification and the detailed information. I think too, I have a clarifying question about how reports from the public on police misconduct are currently managed. I'm just not familiar enough, and that could be a question for Chief Malikian when we get to that agenda item.
Chief Malikian, would you mind responding to that question now?
Not at all. So Commissioner Anderson, there's not a simple answer to that other than the fact that whenever under state law, whenever anyone wishes to file a complaint against the police department or not a member of the police department, the department is obligated to take that complaint, document it, and advise the complainant of a disposition, investigate it, arrive at a disposition, and advise the complainant of the disposition. When I make my presentation in a couple of minutes, you will see that we don't have very many.
Okay.
Which is one of the, I think it's one of the pluses of the department, but it's also one of the challenges when we talk about oversight. There is the process, the investigation is handled internally by the police department. And that probably when you talk about issues of oversight is, I think part of this whole oversight process is to shed, maybe make that process more transparent or give people an alternative method of filing those complaints, not necessarily investigating those complaints, but filing those complaints and getting a report back about what the outcome was.
Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that, Chief Malikian.
Any other questions from the commission about the fire or police liaison reports? Okay. I'd like to invite the public to make any, to raise their hand for public comment on the fire and police liaison reports. Carol, do we have any raised hands?
No raised hands.
Okay, then we will move to item number 9, the police department update.
Chief Malikian, I'll stop my share and you can share your screen. Are you ready for that?
This will be an adventure. I have no idea whether I'm ready for this. We'll find out. We'll
Okay.
find out here in about a
Okay.
second. Okay. All right, let's see if I can. What I don't know is, I just opened this PowerPoint up, but I don't know how to put it up here, I'm afraid.
Do you have the share? There should be a green share screen button at the bottom of your Zoom.
Where? Oh, I got this part.
And then click the share screen.
I got that.
Okay, that's not,
It's not on there. That's what I'm.
but you're.
Yes, it is. Carol, can you put that? I sent it to you.
Sure,
Is it
no
possible-
problem.
Is it possible you put that up? Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not on. There. So thank you. I want to start by saying that the Oversight Formation Commission has been doing their work since early last year. It coincided I think their actual work coincided when I came on board around the 1st of March. I have been particularly struck by, the two commissioners that are on the Fire and Police Commission, as well as several others, in terms of the work and focus and diligence that they've brought to this. And we not surprisingly, don't necessarily agree on everything, but I think there's no question that I don't have any question about the sincerity of what's being brought to the table. Next slide, please. I'm not going to comment today on specific recommendations. I will save that for a future time, because I recognize that there's a possibility that some of these recommendations may change. The members of the commission are, I think, are pretty aware of the department's position on most of the recommendations. But I really wanted to just take a couple of minutes today and make it very clear what my perspective and the perspective of the police department is on this process. And without spending, any more time than necessary, I'm not here to do my bio, but I have some fairly extensive experience with establishing oversight models, both when I was in the Justice Department in Washington and most notably for the city of Seattle. So this is not a new concept for me. As you can see on the slide, and I want to make this very clear, the Santa Barbara Police Department believes that oversight properly implemented would be beneficial to both the community and the police department. I think there's no question about that. And you're going to see in a minute that I really do, and it's not just hyperbole, I believe that the city of Santa Barbara has an exceptional department and an exceptional group of men and women who serve it. We live in an era of concern and skepticism in some ways about policing and about what its role is. And I think that there is a place, I think oversight, a properly done oversight model could help with that. I do think that it is important that the model that's developed ultimately fit the Santa Barbara Police Department and the city of Santa Barbara, not necessarily a broad national narrative. There are, and I will say that I think the decision to bring NACOL, the National Association for Civilian Oversight, was absolutely brilliant and appropriate because they have such broad experience. And I would refer anyone to their website to look at, various models that are available around the country. But again, I think a model that might fit, might fit Minneapolis or might fit Chicago or might fit Seattle doesn't necessarily fit Santa Barbara. I think there's a lot of discussion. When I was with the Justice Department, I helped develop a concept called collaborative reform, and we're not here to talk about that, but it really involves the community and the police department and a third party sitting down and developing a set of concept points that the department agrees to work on. That is true collaboration. I've said from the beginning, the 3 points that I've really tried to make about all this issue. I neglected to mention the first one, which is as we talk about reform, as we talk about changing the system per se, it is critical that we don't denigrate the men and women who are currently doing the work, because that is and will be incredibly destructive in terms of the final outcome that you'll get. The second thing, of course, is about the fact that the model needs to fit Santa Barbara. And then this idea that the police department has to be collaboratively involved in both the development of the process and the implementation of the process. And I would argue that independence and collaboration are not mutually exclusive concepts. On the list of why I think the department is exceptional is this notion of part of the 21st Century Policing Report President's 21st Century Policing Report 2015 was an emphasis that police departments their training and policy should emphasize a reverence for life. I would argue that the police department in Santa Barbara continually demonstrates that on a regular basis, and I've shared with this commission several incidents where lethal force would have been both legally and morally appropriate, and where officers went to great lengths to pursue other means. Next slide, please. This is just a real quick look at some data points on our complaint data, and the term external because in terms of total number of complaints, there are complaints that are generated from outside the police department, people who come and complain about misconduct, but there are also internal complaints generated by supervisors around policy violations and things like that. For the purposes of this discussion, you can see, and if I went back, if there had been more room on the slide, I could have gone back 10 years. These numbers have stayed pretty constant. 2020 is really the only year where there was an outlier in terms of the number of complaints, and I think that was in large measure around the social justice demonstrations and the subsequent contacts with the police. Our use of force the police department is absolutely minimal. It's less than 1% as measured by total contacts. And if you just measure by arrest, it's about 2.5%. And keep in mind that even putting your hand on somebody and move by the arm and moving them from point A to point B is a reportable use of force. So the numbers are pretty good. And then with regards to the use of lethal force, there have been 4 incidents in the last decade, 2 fatal, 1 in custody death that occurred with a subject who was, it actually occurred in the jail, but the person was technically in the custody of the police department, and then 1 officer involved shooting with a wounded suspect. Next slide, please. So this was just, this is my take on what I hope comes out of this process. One is recognizing that there are neighborhoods in Santa Barbara who feel historically marginalized and provide a forum for them to convey their concerns about policing. Secondly is to provide an alternative method of receiving complaints from people who are alleging misconduct, but who may not feel comfortable coming to the police department. And that those investigations, those complaints be turned over to the police department, but that the chief or his or her designee return and report on outcome. Third is identifying auditing issues and direct the chief of police to conduct such audits and report back to the Community Oversight Board. Fourth is receiving regular reports from the chief on broad policy issues. And lastly, and hopefully very infrequently, providing a forum for the community to express concerns around high-profile incidents such as officer-involved shootings, and in that same venue, allow the police chief to provide opportunities for explanations to the community. This is the next slide, please. And there's a very obviously abbreviated and compressed discussion. I'm very optimistic that actually the Oversight Formation Commission and the police department can get very close on outcome, on the final outcome, but that, as I said, I don't want to start commenting on specific recommendations today. I don't think it would be appropriate. That's all I have. Any questions?
I always come with a list of questions, but before I go, I'd like to ask our commissioners, do you have questions for the chief?
Chief Mulligan, how many boards and councils and task force and commissions does the chief of police or representatives from law enforcement report into beyond the City Council of Santa Barbara?
For the most part, unless it's a specific, specific problem area, really only the Fire and Police Commission
Okay.
does the chief report directly to them. Other commissions may request the chief to appear to address a specific issue, but this is the only regular one.
And an additional follow-up question, what has been your existing forum to communicate with the public for higher profile incidents?
Nora, I can't speak for my predecessors. I can only speak for what I have done in other jurisdictions, and that's generally to convene a community forum on my own, and try to provide as much information as is permitted. The problem with that is it's not the best, especially if emotions are running high. It really helps to have, I think, a third party that's kind of facilitating that. Some of the most difficult days that I've spent in my professional career are in forums that I convened myself around these kind of incidents.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? So Chief Malakian, the data that you shared about complaints and force data, how do these numbers compare to national average numbers? So 1%, oh, I took a picture of it, I think. Those numbers seem rather low, but I don't really have anything to compare that to. So I'm wondering if just, anecdotally or offhand, what, how 1% measures to or compares to national on use of force data.
I don't have any national numbers either. I've never looked at that. The jurisdictions that I'm familiar with, that 1% is low, but it's not dramatically low. It really is, especially if you look at the total number of contacts, but even if you look at the total number of arrests, anything below 3 or 4% is in the very low margin. But I don't have some exact numbers, and I wouldn't want to start guessing.
Okay, and I'm curious, what do you see? What do you, as the Community Formation Commission, it sends the draft recommendations to community seeking feedback. What do you see our role as the Fire and Police Commission is during this process? What would you like from us?
Well, Chair Rodriguez, I really think that one of the big questions that's going to have to be resolved once the final sort of recommendations are put forward to the council. I think one of the things that are going to have to be resolved is what is the role of the Fire and Police Commission relative to this newly created body. And my sense is, and I was on the Fire and Police Commission about 6 or 7 years ago for about a year. And my sense was but this is, I may be wrong on this, that there is actually, in terms of the ability to make inquiries into both the police and fire department, that the commission's authority is a little bit broader than ever has actually been exercised. And that there are a lot of areas of reporting and inquiry that I think this commission could request. With respect to some of the other recommendations, for example, about the reception and alternative means of receiving complaints, I'd have to defer to the city attorney or really do an analysis of the municipal code. But I do think that's an incredibly important question that is going to have to be answered before this process goes too far down the road.
Mm-hmm. And I know we can't discuss that too much here without violating the Brown Act. We have to agendize that. And I'm gonna look at John Doimus to make sure that I am not in conflict of interest in this current conversation because I'm on both commissions. When it gets time to discussing and voting on these recommendations, or if we support or not support, Commissioner Wood and I would have to recuse ourselves because of conflict of interest, and it would rely on the 3 remaining commissioners to deliberate and vote. But I would like to ask our commissioners to just keep that question in mind of what is our role as the Fire and Police Commission, knowing that we act as an advisory commission, that we offer recommendations to the City Council on the operations, procedures, policies of both the fire and police departments. So we do have a role to play. And I think maybe perhaps, and I'm going to ask this question to the commission, should we plan on agendizing this conversation for the next meeting so that we can be clear on what our role is and how we want to act?
I'm going to assume that wasn't directed to me.
That was directed to the commissioners on, do you think that we should agendize this item for next meeting to discuss what the role is, or if we have a role in the fire, in the potential, at least in the recommendations?
I think
I
it's
would like
a good idea.
I think that's
I mean,
Sorry, John, go ahead.
no, I'm just saying that I think it's a good idea. I mean, we don't know what we don't know yet. We don't know a lot about when that commission and it's going to be completed. So maybe it's worth discussing, but I don't know that we will have an for sure.
Commissioner Rodriguez, would it be at all possible to include it as an agenda item for the next meeting as if we were a focus group, providing feedback like other focus groups are being facilitated on the recommendations specifically from the perspective of being a fire and police commissioner?
Sure. In the past, we have written letters as a fire and police commission in support of and specifying the things that the body supported in particular. I'm speaking specifically to asking the city for funding for a particular position. We've done that a couple times. So that would definitely fall within our purview. And that would be a much more, I guess, organized and direct agenda item to discuss. And again, Commissioner Luisa and I would have to recuse ourselves from that conversation.
Well, Commissioner, I will have to check if there is a conflict on that. Conflicts usually are either, most of the time you're dealing with financial. I'll check to determine if there would even be a conflict for the need to recuse yourself, because there isn't a financial interest here. I get the appearance of a conflict potentially, but I'll have that analyzed if there's even a need to recuse yourself. But not to go too far down, I think you were correct, Chair Rodriguez. You should just agendize it, not have a further discussion. But the idea of at least making, to have something tangible, the idea of making a recommendation after, reviewing the recommendations and giving input as a commission, since it relates to the police department, is perfectly appropriate.
Okay, so then Carol, can we agendize discussion of CFC draft recommendations for the next, for March's meeting?
Will do.
Great. And I have one comment, maybe, a recommendation that's not related to the draft recommendations. Something that has always impressed me with the Santa Barbara Police Department is when there's reports of critical incidences that could have resulted in an injury or use of force, I'm always impressed with the department's display of or demonstration of reverence for life and using the least amount of force or least force tactics available. there were, numerous incidences in the last, I would say, just 3 months that it could have ended badly, and it ended with a de-escalation process and no injuries. Something that I came across on a social media site this week, and the reason that's impressive to me is because it's counter to the national conversation around policing. So often we hear about the big events that occur where there's a loss of life or a severe injury or a terrible situation. And so these reports are usually very lightly covered in the news in our city when something occurs with the least amount of force. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of our department for that. However, in a social media image or posting I came across this week, I saw an image of an officer, and the write-up was that they were training on how to, I think it was reverse a vehicle, get out of the vehicle, put tactical gear on, and then shoot at a target. And I thought so first my question was, how often do police fire their weapon? And then that particular posting felt like it was very much kind of matching the national conversation about how police use their weapons. And I just, there isn't a question, it's just, I think, a suggestion that social media postings like that make it difficult for certain communities to gain trust in a department, in a police department. And I'll just give a personal explanation to that. One of the reasons that I'm so committed and passionate about working with our local police department is because I grew up in communities where we were afraid of police. Whether it was because of direct interaction or just taught behavior and taught that we should be afraid of police. And so I want communities like that I grew up in to not be afraid to call the police when they need the police. I want them to know that they will be safe in our community should they need to call for help. And social media posts like that, it doesn't help communities like I grew up in feel safe.
Chair Rodriguez, who did post this? Was this posted by a law enforcement agency or just somebody posting?
It was from the Santa Barbara Police Department. I believe it may have been on their, on the Instagram page, and it was highlighting a tactical training that they were doing.
Thank you.
So like I said, it's not a question, it's just more of a suggestion and explanation of that.
I think if I could, Commissioner Rodriguez, I'm not familiar with that particular posting, and I'll look into it. I understand the concern, and I'm not sure what the context was, and I just want to confirm that it was an official Santa Barbara Police Department posting and not the posting of an individual using their own account or identifying themselves. You're on mute.
I just pulled it up on my Instagram, and unless it's somebody who's using the Santa Barbara Police tag or name, it was posted by Santa Barbara Police, and it said, the Santa Barbara Police Department range cadre are always challenging our officers with new training and tactics. Here, an officer has to drive up, exit his patrol vehicle, don protective gear from his trunk, and shoot multiple targets. And while that I'm sure is a needed training protocol, and should our officers need to use that type of tactics, they are well trained for it. I'm just not sure that kind of social media presence will create the safe and confidence that communities who are, you know, who are already feeling uncertain about police would want to see.
Yeah, I'm not sure where to go with that. I need to verify that in point of fact, that wasn't just an individual, which may be the case. But your point in your comment, and I do understand your concerns, and I do understand, I'm not insensitive at all to the optics of some of this. But the reality on the other side of police work is that is the answer to your first question, how often do officers fire their weapon? Almost never. I mean, that's a nationwide statistic. The numbers are, for the number of contacts that law enforcement has with the public on a daily basis, it's minimal. It doesn't mean that that's always right, and it doesn't mean that in some jurisdictions there are problems. But as I pointed out to you, we've had more than 3 discharges of firearms, but we've had 3 discharges of firearms at a person in the last 9 years. And when you figure that officers, there's anywhere from 6 to 10 officers per day, or at any given time, and sometimes more than that out on the street. And if they're contacting, I'm just picking low numbers, 5 to 10 people over the course of a shift, that's a lot of contacts that adds up, and that don't involve force, don't involve using firearms. The paradox of firearms training is that you are training for an event that, one, you hope never happens, and statistically almost never will happen, but you need to be prepared for it when it does. But I understand your concern, and I'll look into it.
Thank you. And I hope that you received this as it was a compliment. It was a compliment in that I see often how our department uses de-escalation and uses verbal commands rather than use of force at various levels. And that's what I'm proud of in our department. Posts like this tell a different story, and it feeds into the fear that some communities are already experiencing. So I hope that you feel the sincerity in that it is a compliment.
Never questioned that. Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission for Chief Melekian? And this is an opportunity for the public to make public comments on the police chief report. Carol, are there any hands raised?
No, Chair Rodriguez.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chief Melekian. And now we'll move to item number 10, which is the fire department update. Chief Males.
Hello there, I'm here. Sorry about that. Just trying to share my screen, and Carol, looks like I need to have permission. Let's see here.
You got it now.
Okay. All righty. Okay, how does that look? Look okay?
Beautiful.
Okay, wonderful. Good afternoon, Chair Rodriguez, Commissioners, Chris Males, your fire chief. I just wanted to give you a brief update. Commissioner Allman and I had a chance to speak for a while this week, as he mentioned, and I just wanted to let you know what's going on with the fire department. I've got just a few slides for you. I actually want to focus most of our time on the standards of cover study. Last month, I gave you some information, just a little teaser of information about what this study was going to encompass and entail. And I can share with you, we've had our first meeting, and it's going to be an extremely comprehensive report. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time on that, but I'll begin with just a general overview of the big topics the fire department's dealing with right now. And then I'll spend a couple of minutes. I see that we might be a little bit pressed for time. I'll just spend a couple of minutes on our monthly report that you received before the meeting, and just give you an idea of some of the things that I'm looking at on a monthly and quarterly basis. because we meet monthly, I typically just very briefly give an overview of a monthly report. And then when the quarterly report comes out, I spend a little bit more time on that. But I realize we have 2 new commissioners, so I wanted to start with the basics of what the monthly report is and what big things that we're looking at. But I know that our time is a little bit pressed, so I'll try to be brief. What I thought I'd talk about today is a little snapshot of our budget and where we're going to be moving for this next year. We're going to talk about automatic vehicle location and where we are with that project. That's a large project. We'll talk about the community risk assessment standards of cover study. I'll talk a little bit about vegetation management. You've likely been seeing a whole lot of news stories about our vegetation management team and what they're doing in the city. I'm really proud of all the work that's going on that side of the department. Talk a little bit about wildland season preparation. My gosh, I know that it seems every year it begins sooner. You've probably seen the fire that started up in the Bishop area, known as the airport fire. Crews are returning from that, but my gosh, to have a fire in February in the eastern side of the Sierras is pretty shocking. We'll talk a bit about promotional exams coming up, hiring, and then I will talk a little bit about the statistics, fire stats information that you have. So just a little bit about the budget. As you know, we operate in a 2-year budget. We are entering into FY23, fiscal year 23, which will be in July. That's when FY23 starts. So we're currently in 22. We are preparing for fiscal year 23. The budget will be adopted in June by council. Due to the continued economic issues that have been plaguing the city, we have been asked to make some cuts to our department for fiscal year 23. With that said, I think we can easily navigate the cuts. But the bigger picture that you've likely heard, either in the media or from council, is that we have a projected structural deficit over the next few years. And I don't want to get into the in depth on that because I think it's better, the reports are better given by other members of our staff. But I think the point is that it's on my mind. And as the fire chief, I'm going to continue to be fiscally responsible and efficient with the tax dollars of the community. So the cuts we're going to make are about 215,000, like it said, and it's going to involve holding open 1 fire inspector position as we did last year, and then making some minor cuts to supplies and services, decreasing some training time, things like that. But we should be able to do it, and we'll be going through the budgetary process over the next couple of months. So I intentionally put this up here as the heading of AVRR equals AVL equals GPS. Wow. Okay. So this is the project to move our fire engines from the fixed response districts that we have right now, or what I have affectionately termed them the postage stamps around the city that our apparatus respond to within their geographic location. We're going to be moving to a global positioning system based response. And it also in the industry stands for AVL, or automatic vehicle location. And to our computer aided dispatch vendor, it actually means automatic vehicle routing and recommendation. This is going to be a big change for our department, and it's going to result in, I believe, improved response times and dispatch efficiency. Again, we've been using fixed response districts, and what's going to happen now is a call is going to come in and our dispatchers will make a keystroke that says they want the computer to ascertain which apparatus is closer. And in a very, very short period of time, less than a half a second, the computer will plot the location of the call in the map that you see. You'll see in the middle at the bottom an apparatus, and at the top, the round circle, red circle, would be the call location. And in about a half a second, it not only plots the distance from the vehicle to the incident, but it also takes into account the route. And you can see that kind of circular route that apparatus takes, but it will judge that time and distance, and then it will compare it with other units. It is so advanced that it takes into account left turns, right turns, stop signs, speed limits, one-way streets, et cetera. So when we roll it out, I tell people that instead of having the fixed districts, we're just going to have a little beehive of activity of fire apparatus running around town and getting picked for a call just based on their geographic location. So it's going to be a much bigger deal during the day when our units are out and about, moving around, going from call to call to training, conducting fire prevention activities, et cetera. In the evening time, we really believe that our stations are, for the most part, very strategically located, but it's still going to take into account the closest available resource, even when the units are in the station. So really what happens is those fixed districts just go away. So that's AVR, AVL, GPS, all those names are synonymous. I try to call it just GPS-based dispatching. So that project is in the works. The new technology has been loaded into CAD. We are in the final stages of working on the mapping. It's actually a lot more involved than people realize. You know, it's like anything. It's like, oh, hey, well, Domino's Pizza is on GPS dispatch. We'll just do it. But it's really interesting because it has to take into account the capabilities of the apparatus. And what I mean by that is, an example, our ladder truck doesn't carry any water. It doesn't have a pump to actually fight fire. It's a large toolbox with a ladder. So if a car fire came in, the ladder truck couldn't be dispatched because they don't have any water in their vehicle, in their apparatus. So we call those capability codes. And what that means is what is an apparatus capable of responding to. So we have to enter all that data, and based on our computer-aided dispatch codes. We have over 90 different computer-aided dispatch codes that our dispatchers use on a daily basis. So it's going to take some time. I'm hopeful in the next few months. My motto is always, let's get it right, not quick. So what we're planning on doing is working with our combined dispatch center personnel. We're going to have a couple of personnel that are going to be dedicated to monitoring it while we're using it in real time. So what I mean by that is we'll be using it during the daytime when the dispatchers are on duty, and they can really, really take a look to make sure that the closest resources are being sent. So we're going to vet it. We're going to spend a lot of time on it, and then we'll roll it out on a 24-hour basis. Next topic, big topic for today is, again, our community risk assessment, standards of cover deployment analysis. Wow, that's a mouthful. The community risk assessment portion of it is just what you would expect. And I'm repeating a little bit from last month, but it's what risk does the city have? And that is from the ocean to the mountains, to the freeway, to the railroad, to how many, what's the age of our buildings? Are our buildings sprinklered? How many more than 3-story buildings do we have? What's the concentration of our buildings? What's the fire flow in the hydrant system based on that? In some of those areas. And really, what's our risk? What does our community face on a daily basis? That's going to be done in parallel with what we call a standards of cover deployment analysis. And that is literally going to look at the over 10,000 calls we're running a year. They're going to look at the last 3 years of data. And they can extrapolate from a historical perspective what our department is likely to face for the next several years. And with call volumes increasing and calls for service increasing, they'll be able to identify strengths and weaknesses of our organization. I was very flattered when we had our first rollout meeting last week, and the consultant said, this is an SOC on steroids. He said, this is one of the most comprehensive SOCs that he has seen. He says it's bordering just underneath a master plan. So I wrote it so that it was still a standards of cover study, but it's really going to ask a lot of things, and I'll get to everything that it's going to ask. It's going to be really time consuming, but it's really going to serve well as a blueprint for our community for years to come. So here are the components of some of the things they're looking at. that the study will be looking at. These are specifically 20 tables that they have asked us to input information on. So I'm going to go down the left column first, overview of our agency. Our personnel and staffing. What's our 24/7 personnel? What's our surge capacity? Do we have an ability to bring people in off duty? How quickly can we do that? They'll be looking at salary and benefits. They'll be looking at not only the fire department's finance and budget, but the city finance and budget. They'll be looking at our management elements and how we effectively manage the department. It's going to look at all of our facilities and stations. It's going to look at the age of the stations. It's going to look at the infrastructure of the stations, things like, is it a drive-through fire station or do the rigs have to back in? That's a safety issue. Backing a fire apparatus is always a concern. So most of the fire stations being built now are drive-through stations. That's just an example. What's our service delivery? What do we respond to? How do we respond? For example, a structure fire, what do we send? How quickly can we get what's called an effective response force on scene? So in other words, we send 3 engines, a ladder truck, and a battalion chief to a structure fire. That's our effective response force. Okay, great. How quickly do we get them there? How quickly does the first engine get there? And how long does it take the rest of the apparatus to get there? It's going to look at training and specifically our EMS education, how we provide education and keep our folks prepared for what's really 70+% of our calls. It's going to look at EMS, and it is going to look at not only what we provide, which is basic life support in the city. It's going to look at potentially the provision of advanced life support. Does our department need to have an advanced life support paramedic unit on duty, for example? But more importantly, it is going to look at the ambulance response times in the city of Santa Barbara. It's also going to look at the current ambulance contract, and the ambulance contract is getting ready to go out to bid. It's the first time, to my knowledge, in my 35+ years of being involved in this community that the ambulance contract has gone out to bid. So what is that RFP going to look at? That's an example of how it really is not it's more than just a standards of cover study. To have them look at an upcoming ambulance contract RFP to make sure that the city's, the community is well taken care of by that ambulance contract. Moving over to the right column, capital equipment. That's everything from our fire apparatus to our jaws of life, to ropes on the fire engines, et cetera. Life safety program, that's really largely the fire prevention division. What is the staffing of our prevention division? How many inspections get done by either engine companies or our fire inspectors? It's going to look at our current communication system. And because we are anticipating moving to regional dispatch, I actually asked them to look also at fast forward basically to after regional dispatch is in place. And what's that likely going to do to the service delivery in the community? But again, they're going to look at our current communication system, all the infrastructure of the communication system, from our 911 system to our radio repeaters, et cetera. They're going to look at special operations, our specialty incidents that we respond to, such as urban search and rescue, hazardous materials, wildland, et cetera. They're going to look at our planning and what kind of short, medium, and long-term planning is happening in the department. For example, we just did a strategic plan in 2019, so they will look at that and look at the direction of the department with the planning. With planning in mind. They're going to look at our mutual aid. As I've mentioned before, our mutual aid commitment continues to increase each and every year. We have to really balance that with making sure that our primary responsibility is right here in the city of Santa Barbara. So we have a very delicate balance with how much we commit to outside the jurisdiction versus keeping an adequate number of firefighters at home. And one thing I want to say is I really think of our jurisdiction as the county of Santa Barbara, especially the entire South Coast. So For example, if we have a fire bearing down on the community of Goleta, such as the holiday fire that happened a couple of Julys ago, that's a different story than sending mutual aid, say, to Northern California. We function, again, like I mentioned, the word beehive, an incident that is in close proximity to the city of Santa Barbara is handled very aggressively along with the home agency, but we're very tempered and very balanced when we're looking at a true mutual aid, way out of county type of deployment. So what I mean by that is, let's say the Alisal fire happens and the county needs 3 engines. We send them 3 of the closest fire engines right now, no questions asked, and we'll backfill those stations as quickly as possible. If the fire's in Northern California, we have a preset rotation. The crews are notified. They're given the opportunity to get their out-of-county equipment put on their apparatus, that kind of thing. I don't want to digress too much, but they're going to look at our mutual aid commitment. I can share with you that this last wildland season, we billed $2.1 million to the state or the feds. And I know I mentioned this last time, but 1.2 million alone was for the Dixie Fire. That was over a 1 million acre fire, and we had crews on that for weeks. I've mentioned community risk, and that is exactly what it sounds like. Again, what does our city face? What unique hazards do we face? Some people look at the city of Santa Barbara and go, wow, you have 8 fire stations. For 23 square miles, that might be a lot of fire stations. If you look at the city of Ventura, I believe they have 6. Well, Ventura is geographically very different than the city of Santa Barbara. There's an old adage at City Fire, you can't get there from here. And what we mean by that is that it takes a long time to get to some areas of the city. So we do have our fire stations very strategically located based on response times, not necessarily how big the district is, because as you can imagine, going up, California Avenue to Grand to get up into the Riviera, that takes a little bit of time. So our stations are a little bit closer together than maybe some other departments our size. Our emergency services capability, and that is just what capabilities do we have? How can we handle multiple incidents at one time? What happens if we have 2 structure fires at one time? Just the general delivery of emergency services, and then critical tasking. And that's going to be how we address major incidents, how they are handled, what kind of infrastructure do we have in place, that kind of thing. So that's just a quick overview. Just it's likely going to be a 1 to 200 page report that comes out of it. I expect as with any consultant, they'll probably find some areas that we can improve, but I do know that they're going to find that we're doing an excellent job for our community that I'm really proud to see our firefighters doing every day. So there will be a lot of people involved. There are specifically placeholders for meetings with elected and appointed officials. There are meetings with department heads, of course, the city manager, other agencies, other jurisdictions, including our bordering agencies. The police department will be involved. Obviously, our current dispatch center will be heavily involved. It's just going to be a really comprehensive study. So just a quick overview on that. Moving on to vegetation management. As I mentioned earlier, you've likely seen a whole lot of press coverage recently. We were able to bring in, yes.
Chief, just would you prefer all questions to kind of happen at the end, or would you like to take questions in between?
It's up to you, your preference. I'm happy to go back to whatever you'd like to do.
Do you have a lot more like different topics after this?
I think there's just a couple of more. Yeah.
Okay, then I'll wait to the end.
Okay, no problem. So as I mentioned, vegetation management, we've been doing a lot of it. I'm excited to share with you that we applied for a grant through the Coastal Conservancy. They are handing out a lot of grants in several different areas. We asked for a grant in fuels mitigation, and we asked for upwards of $500,000 for fuels mitigation. Now that sounds great and we can use it, but we're very tempered with what we ask for because we only have so much capacity to get work done. We have 3 people in our vegetation management section. So, running multiple projects at once becomes a little bit prohibitive on staff, but we've come up with a really good plan if we get the grant. It's a little premature to share some of the details, but if we get the grant, we've got some really unique plans in place that I look forward to telling you about. Wildland season preparation. I could just cover this very quickly. We're going to begin in the next month or so preparing our folks for wildland season. We talked a little bit about the weather. We've gotten minimal rain and these are our rainiest months, January, February, March, and we're just not seeing it. There's a concern that the grasses are already going to start turning here in the next month or so. And we expect, unless we start to get some significant rain, we expect to be likely responding to fires by April or May. If you recall, the Jesucita fire happened on May 5th. So it was not a late season fire. So unfortunately, it's becoming our reality. It seems to move up in the calendar every year. Promotional exams, we'll be holding 2 promotional exams this spring, engineer exams and captain's exam. We won't be holding a battalion chief's exam because we're flush with battalion chiefs right now. We will hold that when we have a vacancy or a pending vacancy, but this is a large lift for our training division. We, of course, have the help of HR and other agencies that help us with proctoring these exams, but this is a large focus of our training division. I'm really proud of the quality of the exams that our department puts on. They're fair. When I was in training, I said that this was my motto. They're fair but challenging. And we want to make sure that our folks are well prepared for promotions. So those will be happening in the next couple of months. And we are anticipating having to run an academy. We do a little different type of hiring than the police department does. We actually require our candidates to have a college fire academy. A little bit different than the police department, where the police department would hire someone and put them through an academy. They actually have to have an academy before they get hired, and then we put them through our academy. So the academies are held or are provided by community colleges throughout the state. Allen Hancock College and Oxnard College are our 2 closest. And, but then once they're hired, we also put them through. Now there's other prerequisites. They're required to be an EMT, things like that. But we also put them through a very agency specific, an academy that runs anywhere between 8 and 12 weeks. So we don't know how many we're going to be hiring, but it'll happen likely after July. But the standards of cover may change the number we hire, probably not. But if they make recommendations for another apparatus or something like that, it's too, obviously the study is not done, but we'll likely be amending any hiring based on what the standards of cover study says. And then the last topic is I just wanted to give you a quick overview. I provided you a monthly document on statistics. We use a company, as I've mentioned, called FireStats. This is all they do. And they do an excellent job for us. And so I gave you a very brief overview of what these reports consist of. The monthly reports are largely driven by response times versus the quarterly reports are driven by call type. So we focus on response times in the monthlies, and then we really focus on what did the fire department respond to over the quarter? How many fires, how many medical calls, how many vehicle fires, things like that. So as I mentioned last month, total response time is the final of 3 unique and independent actions that occur. And so when we look at total response time, it's call processing time, and that's from the first 911 call till the apparatus are actually alerted in the station. And then you'll see turnout time, which is from the time the lights go on till the time the apparatus is rolling. And then we have travel time, and that equals total response time. So if I could, I'd like to just switch. Let me make sure I can do this. Can everyone see the fire stats report now? No? Okay, hold on, I'm sorry. Let me see here. Oh, okay. Let me go to this real quick. Sorry about that. I might have an issue trying to share my screen. Okay, can you see it now? Okay, great. I know it's gonna be I'm just gonna scroll through it really quickly in the interest of time. So this is a monthly report. One thing I wanna caution us is not to draw too many conclusions off of 1 month's report. We really do a better job by looking at an annual report, but because one thing you're gonna see is we may be down a little bit in one area, but then up in the other area, and there's a strong correlation to that. So I'm gonna scroll forward to some of the tables. So this is call processing time. And again, this is from the second the 911 call rings in the dispatch center to the time that the units are en route. And we strive for an NFPA, National Fire Protection Administration, processing time of 60 seconds and 90% of the time. And you'll see we're a little bit short here, but this is actually really good. This is better than we've done in the past. Now, I want to again caution trying to make the NFPA standard. There's an awful lot of unknowns and issues that happen with call processing. For example, someone calls up and says, "Hi, there's just been a traffic accident at State and Carrillo. Is anybody hurt?" No, nobody's hurt. And then 30 seconds later, the reporting party goes, "Actually, there is somebody hurt." And so the call takes a completely different journey at that point. And then you'll see that, it would turn into, say, an injury traffic accident. It might take a little bit more time to process that call. But overall, this is actually really good and fairly industry standard. You'll see that our average is about
apology
60.
Required, semicolon, it was a valid concern.
I'm sorry, Chief Malecki, was that you? I'm sorry. Oops, I'm sorry. Okay, I thought he maybe had a question. So you'll see it's very good, and average of about 64 seconds, and then we're up at 70 right now. But looking at the last 3 months, you'll see that we're quite up from an average of 57%. I want to show you in the center. Notice that our call processing time went way down in the months of April, May, June, and July of 2020. What happened there? That was COVID. And the Emergency Medical Services Agency that we work under at the county instituted a number of questions that we were required to ask at the time. If you remember the beginning of COVID, we were required to ask such questions as, have you traveled outside the country in the last 14 days? So there were a ton of questions that had to be asked. And so you'd see that our call processing time went down a little bit. That's completely norm for the fire service. Turnout time. Turnout time again is from the time the alarm goes off till we're en route. This is a little subjective also. It depends on what exact time the fire captain pushes the button saying that they're en route. That could be done before they leave the station, or that can be done as they're pulling out on the ramp. That could be done as they've got their headset on, they've got their turnout coat on, and they go, "Oops, we're en route." You'll see that the vast majority of our calls are right around 45 seconds to a minute. I can tell you that that's largely due to some of our stations are 2-story stations. It just physically takes a little bit of time to get out the door. And then moving on, and again, you can look at all these, you'll see travel time. We want to be traveling for less than 4 minutes, and you'll see that 72% of the time we're there. This is something that's very difficult. As a fire chief, I really want to balance the needs of the community with also the safety of the community. Telling my firefighters get to calls quicker. I'm okay with saying we can perhaps work on our call processing time. We can work on our turnout time, but I'm really hesitant to tell our folks, hey, you need to drive faster, because as you well know, the streets of Santa Barbara are very, very difficult to navigate. And one-way streets, narrow streets, et cetera, our apparatus are not getting any smaller. So overall, our travel time is decent. And then you will see that our total response time, our overall, all of the calls in the city of Santa Barbara are average of about 6 minutes and 15 seconds. We're hitting 63.2% of the time. This is all important stuff for the standards of cover study. This is the stuff that they're going to look at. When they look at, do we need another fire apparatus over here? Can we take one away here and move it over here? This is all stuff that they're going to look at. So you'll be receiving these reports on a monthly basis. And like I said, you'll get, and again, I just wanted to skate the highlights of it. You'll get the quarterly reports on a quarterly and then an annual, of course. So that's the end of my report, and I'll take any questions.
Do commissioners have questions for Chief Males on his report?
Chair Rodriguez and Chief Males, I just have a couple of questions to follow up. One is on your periodic updates to the commission, whether it's monthly or every other month or perhaps quarterly, could you also include the work that you're doing for community engagement, community disaster education workshops? I know a lot is happening, especially now that we're kind of coming out of COVID and things can be transitioning from virtual to in-person. And so I just really like to have more information and be able to highlight the work of your team and again, being able to educate and prepare our citizens for responding to disasters.
Commissioner Anderson, absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. Over the last 2 years with COVID, we've been largely conducting classes via Zoom and trying to do what we can to conduct in-person classes. But we've really kind of changed the way that we reach out to the community. We've really increased our social media presence and tried to do a lot more cyber education. But you are 100% right, and it's actually happening right now. As we emerge out of COVID, we're starting to get requests for classes, for CERT classes, for LISTOS classes, for fire extinguisher training, that kind of thing. So it absolutely will be, what I plan to do is we really have kind of, as I mentioned from the organizational chart last year, I want to focus on operations, prevention, our administrative bureau, and then of course our Office of Emergency Services, which includes public education. So that'll be part of a standard report that I'll do.
Thank you so much. And I'm also curious about your relationship with the California Fire Safe Council and the Santa Barbara Fire Safe Council. I know that they've received a lot of funding and have been prioritizing funding around fuels reduction and vegetation management. So I'm curious if there is an existing relationship or if they focus on less resource parts of the county and you're able to access, again, even the grant through the Coastal Conservancy, I thought is a huge win if you're a little bit more creative about seeking funding opportunities outside of that.
Commissioner Anderson, the answer is I'll even say D, all of the above, to include CAL FIRE grants.
Oh,
so
right.
CAL FIRE has millions of dollars of grants that are available. They're often distributed on a rotational basis. We got a $300,000 grant 2 years ago for our community wildfire protection plan. So we might not be able to grab a CAL FIRE grant, but in answer to your question specifically about Fire Safe Council, yes. In fact, I just attended a conference yesterday where we were given an update on the grant money that's available through different organizations this year. And for example, like I mentioned, the Coastal Conservancy, and the Fire Safe Council. And there is a large grant, and Commissioner Allman could speak to it probably more in depth, but there is a large Fire Safe Council grant that's happening across the front country. And in fact, there's even former Bren School PhD that's been hired to do a lot of fuels work, and it's being paid for by a grant, or fuels analysis being paid for by a grant. The short answer, and I know I can be long-winded, is our fire prevention division is constantly looking for grants. But again, it does a bit go back to our capacity. Having the money to do the work is great, but we also have to have the capacity to oversee. You can't just turn a fuels crew over in the Riviera and say, go to it. You actually, there's a lot of oversight and logistics that are required to deploy these teams. But we are reaching out. We even had another organization, a volunteer organization that's a nationwide organization, contact our staff, and they want to bring their paid, but it's volunteer to the community, and they want to bring their folks in and do fuels mitigation. So we are constantly looking. And I don't know if Commissioner Allman, you wanted to say a little bit more about the Fire Safe Council, but the grants are out there and we do try to get them on a regular basis.
I might just chime in, mention a little bit. Currently, the Fire Safe Council County has been around since the 70s somewhere, and I've been with them quite a while. But what's happened more recently is that we've been able to garner grants that are making our organization more robust. We're able to really start digging in. Not that long ago, we didn't have two nickels to rub together, and now we're working on some projects that are going to really make a difference. And I think the chief talked about that, but we're really happy. We've been able to hire, I think, 3 people, which we've always been volunteers. So now we have some really great folks that are working budget and planning and all that. So we're off to the races right now, and it's very exciting. And we have a great webpage. County Fire Safe Council. Barbie ought to have a look at it. Anybody should have a look at it. But thanks for asking that question. Really, it was great.
Well, and I appreciate that. I actually met Anne Marie Parkinson, your latest hire from the Bren School, and she is absolutely impressive. Really excited about the Firewise community, resources that are coming in, and again, being able to engage the rural community. So I appreciate the detailed answers. Thank you both.
Sure.
Any other questions from the commissioner or Chief Males? Well, I have my list. So it sounds like the CRA, the SOC, is a detailed audit of the department's efficiency and effectiveness, and that I appreciate that so much. I'm curious if it will also include a component on community relations. In particular, I'm thinking about the community members who might have accessibility or challenges, or maybe auditory challenges, or mental health struggles. Will this include a component of how the department is responding to those segments of the community?
There is a line item for that, but you bring up a very good point, and I can emphasize that. I do know that when they are reaching out to the community, they're going to reach out by a number of different means, whether it be Zoom or in-person town hall meeting, obviously COVID permitting. But I do know that they plan on looking at a number of different issues that the community does face. So, but I appreciate that information, and there is one line item that I'm aware of, but I will make sure to emphasize that.
Thank you. And is this standard practice for departments to conduct this type of analysis? And if so, how often is it done?
I mean, it's done on a regular basis by, I mean, the consultant is busy, I can tell you that. But I can tell you, looking at our city, I'm not aware of it ever having been done. And I think with technology and where we're at and how we're able to track, even if it was done 5 years ago, this is going to be way more comprehensive than 5 years ago, just with the data analysis that's available at their fingertips. I mean, when I sit there and I say, they're going to be looking at 3 years of computer aided dispatch, data, that's over 30,000 calls they're going to look at. And even 10 years ago, they might have been shuffling through paper to try to figure that out. So again, I'm not aware of it ever being done. Maybe Commissioner Allman, you're aware. You and I have been around, I think, as long as anyone. You know, I know departments can do these types of reports every 5 to 10 years is not uncommon. But this is our first.
Well, thank you for that proactive organization on this. I think this is going to be really helpful for our community and tell a bigger picture of the needs and how you're currently practicing. In regards to the vegetation management, if it's how I'm imagining, which would be like the railroad tracks along the highways and some of the more rural areas, I think that you will probably come into contact with quite a bit of homeless encampments. And so I'm wondering if you can speak about how that vegetation management and homeless, what that relationship is.
So I'll back up just a little bit in that our vegetation management planning is driven by our community wildfire protection plan. That is a blueprint for us to triage where we concentrate our efforts, how often we have to concentrate our efforts. Keep in mind that when you do vegetation management, it's not one and done. You actually have to come back and do it again after so many years. But we have different risk areas in the city, and so we concentrate on those areas. We do work with our partners at Union Pacific and Caltrans to clean up homeless encampment areas. We do work in collaboration with law enforcement. We work in collaboration with other city departments. And when it's needed, we try to get out and, of course, educate and make sure, well, first of all, we make sure that everyone is safe. And then we work on education. And of course, we have, laws that guide us to what we can and can't do. But the answer is yes, we'll probably be working in some of those areas, but keep in mind that like the railroad corridor is owned by the Union Pacific. So for us to go in and do vegetation management, perhaps we could actually work better if we were to get them to do the vegetation management. So it's a little more comprehensive and a little bit complicated, but suffice it to say, if you take a look at the CWPP, you'll see what the projects are, and we actually have a numerical list of what we plan to go through. I can tell you this, again, some of the coverage of Honda Canyon, which is up on the mesa behind Miramonte, the work that we did in there is phenomenal. Now, we didn't moonscape the area. We just went in and cleared brush away from houses and worked to create defensible areas where the fire could stop. But to my knowledge, and again, I'll defer to Commissioner Allman, I don't know if we've ever done vegetation management in Honda Canyon, and we were able to do that this year because we had the funding.
Yeah, I've never, in the time I've been there, we never did do any work in Honda Canyon. Great place to start too for that kind of project, for sure.
The problem is I keep referring to you, Commissioner Allman, and we're dating ourselves. This is
That's fine.
Okay.
I have no problem.
My last comment, I guess it's more of an invitation and just recognizing the skills and talents we have on this commission as you start to do interviews for your promotional exams. You obviously have a wonderful relationship with Commissioner Allman, but we also have Commissioner Anderson, who has extensive experience in fire protection and emergency services. So I invite you to invite them to your panels.
Thank you. We will. We often have two different panels in, say, a captain's and battalion chief's exam. We have a technical panel where we are drilling into, okay, you're the captain of a ladder truck. How are you going to do this auto extrication? And then we have a community panel that's, and we need different people for both. So I love the offer, and we have utilized in the past, and I am big on utilizing members of the community. I think it's a great way to show that the community has buy-in in the fire department. It's really important to me to even show our candidates the amount of time and care that we put into the promotional process. It's humbling to be a candidate and walk in and go, wow, that person's here. Okay, this is legit. So I appreciate the offer. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation. I always learn so much about our department and your planning and your proactive organization. So thank you for that. Are there any other questions for Chief Nails? And this is an opportunity for the public. If you would like to make public comment on Chief Nails' presentation, can you raise your hand? Carol, do we have any hands raised?
No hands raised.
Okay, thank you so much, Chief Nails. And we will now move to item number 11, which is staff communications. And this is an opportunity for the commission to share any meetings that they've attended or activities that they participated in since our last meeting. Would anyone like to share?
The only one thing I could say, and I did already mention it to folks, was the interest in the Fire Safe Council. That webpage is full of great information. Not only that, in May, early May, we're going to be having a big event out at the Direct Relief. They've invited us to use their building for a program that we're putting on, and it's really going to be a large gathering, I hope. But we've been working on it for a few months, and I think that you're going to find out. Anne Marie is a big part of that, of course, Barbara, and you'll find it it'll be on the website, and I can't give you the exact dates. It's the first weekend in May, I believe. So something to put on the calendar. And just FYI, I'm excited about it.
Well, I look forward to going in May. Thank you. Last week, I did attend a swearing in and pinning of a new VIP, volunteer in policing, and I think it was the official pinning of a current volunteer in policing, and that was really special. These are members of the community who volunteer their time to interact with community in uniform with badges and patches with the Santa Barbara Police Department logo. And it really allows for street presence, for folks to ask questions, for businesses to engage. And so that was really cool to see a new person and a current person being sworn in. I think that's all for me to report. Alrighty, if there isn't any other staff communications, I think we can adjourn this meeting. Do we need to do a roll call to adjourn, Carol?
I think John Doimus said we don't need to do a roll call, but if you'd like to, we certainly can, or vote.
Okay, so if there are no questions or no further comments, I think I'd like to go ahead and adjourn the meeting of February 24th, Fire and Police Commission. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
all of the traffic for that housing development would all need to come from the Haley intersection down the entire block. By having a two-way street, you'd be able to split that up a little bit better. So you probably expect to see about like half of the cars coming on the south through Gutierrez and turning right and going up Anacapa and then making a quick left turn into their driveway. So it would be able to bypass a lot more of the block in terms of how much traffic would be on that street. I don't have a good answer for the number of parking spaces for that development. I do know that the driveway that they're proposing is on Anacapa. So the existing driveway that's on Gutierrez Street would be removed. That's just west of Anacapa. So that would free up maybe 3 more parking spaces on Gutierrez, but yeah, I don't have a good answer for the total number of units or how many parking spaces would be provided for that.
But Dot, I could add just in general for any new land development project that is of goes through the standard land development process. Again, I don't have all the specifics for that